Good afternoon from Los Angeles, and thank you for joining us here again today. There is much to discuss since we last met back in December. Today I'd like to share with you new January data, go over operational challenges throughout the supply chain, offer some forecasting, and of course, answer your questions. I'd like to begin with a brief overview of the full and complete year of 2020. For calendar year 2020, the Port of Los Angeles processed 9.3 million 20-foot equivalent units. That was a decrease of 1.3% year on year. That's remarkable because at the end of May, as you may remember, we were down nearly 19% compared to the prior year. For the last 6 months of 2020, the port averaged more than 908,000 TEUs per month, a dramatic turnaround from the first 6 months of 2020 when we averaged just 627,000 TEUs per month. In fact, the port's third and fourth quarter of 2020, cargo volume increased 50% over the first half of the year, with the port handling a remarkable 94% more traffic the week before Christmas than the same week in 2019. I'm so very proud of our ILWU dock workers, truckers, marine terminal operators, and stakeholders across the supply chain for their outstanding work under such challenging conditions. Now, let's take a look at how 2021 is starting out. For the month of January, we moved 835,513 TEUs, representing a 3.6% increase compared to last January. It is the sixth consecutive month of year-on-year increases driven by the one-way trade of imports. In January, 87 container vessels berthed at the Port of Los Angeles, including 8 additional or extra loaders, to meet the high demand in Asia. There were no canceled sailings for the month of January. We ended that month with 22 vessels at anchor. More on that shortly. On the import side of our business, we moved more than 437,000 TEUs, a 5.5% jump over last January, as American consumers have continued on their unprecedented buying surge that started last summer and hasn't slowed yet. Exports came in at a dismal 119,000 TEUs, a 19.5% decrease compared to last January. And exports continue to lag, dropping 25 of the last 27 months here in Los Angeles. The primary causes continue to be American trade policy, China retaliatory tariffs, and the value of the U.S. dollar making our goods more expensive to buy than from other countries. And we are still witnessing a rush to get empty containers back to Asia and pre-positioned for the next round of imports. Those empty containers were more than 278,000 TEUs during the month of January, a 14.5% increase compared to last year at this time. And once again, empty containers are more than double the amount of loaded exports on our docks. These empty containers remain in very high demand in Asia, creating a push to hurriedly fill vessels with as many exports and empty containers as possible before returning to Asia. For the San Pedro Bay, both ports had a good start to January, with volume up 11.6% bay-wide compared to January of last year. And the labor shift work is also off to a very strong start in 2021, as you can see by the orange line depicted on your slide. As of week 7, ending February 12th, total shift counts, including both registered and casual longshore labor for the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, was almost 49,000 shifts. For the first 7 weeks of the year, our labor shifts are up 22% compared to the same time frame in 2020, and when compared to the all-important 4-year average shown by the gray line on your slide, 2021 labor shifts are up by 12%. We are pleased that the vaccines are slowly starting to get into the arms of longshore workers. They've been on the job every day since the emergency orders came about last March. We at the Port of Los Angeles and many other industry folks will continue to advocate with policymakers at all levels for sufficient supplies of vaccine to make sure that we can cover all of our transportation workers here at the port complex. There are 15,000 longshore men and women on the job, and another 80 to 85,000 in the truck industry, electricians, rail, warehousing, and so many others, including our marine terminal operators, who work on our docks every day. And we need to get vaccine for all of them. The Port of Los Angeles is ready to assist with a mass vaccination site at our cruise terminal as supplies of the vaccine and inventories become available. We remain ground ready here at the Port of Los Angeles. Port Police puts up a drone every week to give us a view of public safety and our terminal operations. They've also been capturing vessels at anchorage. Today, the San Pedro Bay has 62 vessels at anchor. Of those, 25 are destined to the Port of LA, including 20 container ships. To give you perspective, under normal conditions, we usually don't have any container ships at anchor. Before the import surge, we would see 10 to 12 container vessels worked at berth on a typical day here at the Port of LA. Today, we are averaging north of 15 container ships being worked every day. About 15% of vessels that are currently on their way to Los Angeles are going direct to berth. Of the 85% of ships going to anchor, the average wait time has been climbing. When ships first started backing up in November, anchorage time was about 2.5 days. In February thus far, anchorage time is now tracking at 8 days. Switching to our terminals, you can see they are fully operational and very busy, with labor shifts working both day and night sides. Terminal utilization is currently above 90%, and we in the industry consider 80% land utilization to be at full capacity. Container dwell time on terminals remains at about 5 days, or double what it was before the import surge started this summer. Street dwell time, waiting for warehouse space, is now at 7.6 days for a traditional 40-foot container. That's quite high for us. We need to get back to about 3.5 days of on-street dwell time where it was holding pre-import surge. And I know so many of us in the industry are focused on that effort today. Our truck and railroad resources continue to be stretched thin, in addition to the winter weather events that we've seen throughout the country over the last week. And our local warehouses are at or near capacity and still experiencing reduced staffing levels due to the physical distancing requirements from our medical experts. This has slowed their ability to absorb cargo and return equipment, such as chassis and containers, back to the port system. I'd like to point out 2 new initiatives we're working on here at the port to address these evolving challenges. I'm pleased to give you a first look today at our latest data tool, the Control Tower. We're soft launching the Control Tower this week at tower.portoptimizer.com. The Control Tower, gleaned from the Port Optimizer data, is another service provided by the Port of Los Angeles to get critical information to San Pedro Bay stakeholders so they can make good decisions and improve efficiencies. In the past 6 months, the Port of Los Angeles has introduced the Signal and Return Signal. Both have become well-received and highly utilized tools. The Control Tower will add to that catalog of data instruments for our customers. In Phase 1 of the Control Tower, co-developed with Wabtec, real-time port-level views of truck turn times at all 6 Los Angeles terminals that are updated in real time via geo-stamp data. We're also providing historical averages for the Port of LA as a whole and breakdowns by month and day. Trending volumes also include a snapshot of recent data and future weeks, including breakdowns by service and vessel. Historical volumes include the ability to review trends at the Port of LA dating back to 2017, with breakdowns by shipping line and vessel as well. Phase 1 also incorporates the Signal data, giving stakeholders a place to get current information on arriving cargo. The Control Tower will continue to evolve throughout 2021. Based on stakeholder feedback and supply chain developments, we will continue to add more data and features, thinking about rail data, dwell times, anchorage statistics, and more. We are committed to the belief that reliable and accessible data produces efficiencies at our port. We are the only port in North America currently offering this array of services, but I believe that will change. I'm optimistic that this type of data will eventually be more uniform and available at every node of the supply chain. On February 1st, we launched our turn time and dual transaction incentive program. The port has invested $7.5 million to incentivize further efficiency on our terminals, rewarding stakeholders for better performance. With this program, terminal operators have two ways to earn financial rewards. One, for shortening the time it takes to process trucks dropping off or picking up cargo, and the other for trucks handling both transactions in the same trip. We should start seeing data from the terminals over the next few months, and we'll share it with you directly as it becomes available. For the remainder of February, import volume remains strong through the Lunar New Year holiday and for the first quarter in totality. Our forecast for February is 730,000 TEUs. That would be a 34% jump over February last year. But please remember that February through May of 2020, we saw very low numbers as the impact of the pandemic hit China and then shortly after the U.S. Our early forecast for the month of March is 775,000 TEUs, which would be a 72% increase over 2020, when you may remember we hit the abyss and moved only 450,000 TEUs. Retail sales numbers announced today are up 5.3% for the month of January, showing that the American consumer is continuing to spend. And at this time, Philip, I'm happy to take any questions or comments from the group today.
Very good. Thank you, Gene. For anyone who's got a question, please go ahead and type it into the chat, into the Q&A portion of the Zoom call down below. We'd be happy to take those questions. We've got a couple in advance that we'll start with, but anyone who wants to ask more, please do so at this time. The first question came in from Stas Margaronis at the American Journal of Transportation. His question is, does the Port of Los Angeles believe terminals and truckers will meet Clean Air Action Plan mandates for zero-emission cargo handling equipment in 2030 and zero-emission harbor trucks by 2035?
Thanks for the question, Stas, and we appreciate you always attending. To clarify, the two mayors of Long Beach and Los Angeles resolved that the Clean Air Action Plan was to have zero emissions equipment by the dates you stated as an ambitious goal set. We're doing all that we can to make this happen. We're currently involved in 16 demonstration projects, testing 134 units of advanced equipment, including 78 zero-emissions trucks that are either being tested or assembled right now. It'll take more than just the ports. This is definitely going to be a public-private partnership, and it's needed to do it in that way. We have to show the manufacturers that we can be good customers. We have to show their tiered suppliers that we will continue to invest in cleaner technology. And right now, we're inside that critical 9-year window to get zero emissions equipment on our marine terminals. Recently, the City of Los Angeles issued a request for information from industry on how better we could accelerate the movement to zero emissions technology. And as we look through those responses, some are very creative, but others talk about the great need to inject capital into this system. We also have work being done by our own California Assembly member, Patrick O'Donnell, who is advancing a bill through the state's assembly in an effort to help work on the sales tax and the grant-making capabilities for these zero-emissions vehicles. No matter how hard we push, they still have to be affordable to the men and women who drive those trucks and who work on our marine terminals. Thank you, Stas. Really great question. And we'll keep you posted on our progress.
The next question is from Craig at KNX News Radio. Good afternoon, Gene. On the 19% drop in exports, what kind of products are not being exported because of trade and dollar value issues?
Thanks for the question, Craig, and appreciate you joining again today. What we're seeing is that the agricultural sector, manufacturing broadly, and the automotive markets have all been impacted by our ill-advised trade policies and the strength of the U.S. dollar. And I know that in working with the new administration thus far, there's a keen awareness, and in part, we believe we have a role to play at helping get the 10 million Americans who are out of work back on the jobs. So this is going to take a lot of finesse, some policy work, and I believe even some incentives at the federal level to help get that churn back going on American exports. Thank you for the question.
Next question is from Niraj at the New York Times. What are the main causes of congestion? Labor shortages, equipment, influx of cargo, all of the above? And can the port do anything to resolve these, or does cargo need to work its way through the system? Any kind of an outlook for the near future? And is this a one-off situation due to the pandemic?
Thanks, Niraj, and good to hear from you. The main causes to the congestion are all of the above. It's a pandemic-driven buying surge, unlike one that we've ever seen from the American consumer. Most of us are not spending money on services. We're not going to the movies, taking airplane flights, or going to ball games. We're spending money on tangible goods. And that's what's really driving this unprecedented surge in imports. Because of COVID-19, not all of our workers are on deck every day. That too has an impact. Because our exports are down, it puts additional stress on the service providers of rail, truck, terminal, and vessel services to try to manufacture round-trip economics that are no longer existent in this marketplace. We've also seen that because there is so much cargo coming in, many retailers cannot digest that cargo as quickly as they normally would, hence the dwell times skyrocketing as I presented moments ago. So all of this adds into the equation, but we're still processing cargo at record numbers. Our longshore labor, the three locals, 1363 and 94, their average member is out on the job more than 5.5 days per week. And I know some friends here in the harbor area that are working 7 days a week. So we're putting every available person in skilled labor out on the job, but it's just a lot of cargo. And put it to you this way, if we stopped all shipments right now, we'd still have about a month's worth of work from those ships at anchor in trying to get them through the system. So three things need to happen immediately. Number one, we have got to get our workers vaccinated so we can have maximum capacity out on the job in the docks, the warehouses, and our truck and rail communities. Second, we've got to implore our importers to do their very best at emptying these containers once they arrive, picking them up quickly, and returning them back to the port area so we can get that round-trip cycle going. And again, not very popular, but we've already been in discussions with industry folks to see if we can meter cargo to help us dig out of this backlog. There have been several services that have been switched so far, temporarily, that will come back to Los Angeles, but we need to really catch our breath and go after this backlog of anchored ships with new and renewed enthusiasm. Thanks, Niraj. Appreciate the question.
Next question is from Eric Watkins at Lloyd's List. There have been complaints of a labor shortage at the port, but not related to the coronavirus. Is the port actually short of labor? And if so, who is responsible for this? Is it not the shipping lines and terminal operators who back the Pacific Maritime Association, which does all of the hiring of labor?
Eric, I've said for some time now, even dating back to the public hearings on APMT's project, that we need more skilled labor out on the docks. And our 2040 forecast illustrates just that. That even with the sense of automation that has been placed at these twin ports, we will still need to increase longshore labor. And that is just simply fact. So if we could hire more, I would be a strong proponent of that. What we are seeing, though, is that COVID-19 has had some impact. As I mentioned, there are many variables in this equation. But right now, we have about 800 workers who are off the job out of 15,000 dock workers due to COVID-related illness or otherwise being quarantined at this juncture. We need to get vaccines to these folks so they can be healthy to go on the job and when they return home to their families in the evenings and mornings. That's going to be very important to us. So we work very closely with both the ILWU and the PMA. We've got to do a better job as an industry to scale up and scale down based on cargo flows, whether they be in unique surges like this or when the tide ebbs just a little bit. And we are working at the industry level to do just that. So a lot of folks are keenly aware that we've got to be able to flex a bit more than we've shown to be capable of in the past, and we'll start to see some improvement there, I believe. Everybody's all in, trying to do their level best at this time.
Before I get to the next question, just a reminder that if you have any further questions, please type them into the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. Next question is from Jeff Berman of Logistics Management. With annual comparisons forecasted to see large gains over the next several months, will there be an inflection point at some point once we get closer to the traditional fall peak? Additionally, what about the ongoing impact of e-commerce on volumes, which many view as a permanent change?
Yeah, good questions. The data forecasting tools that we use and the industry context that we regularly speak with are showing that the flow of cargo will continue strong into the second quarter of this year. While there may be a slight break, we will see traditional cargo that is scheduled for year-end holidays starting to pick up again in August. But I don't see us really taking a huge dip in cargo flow because of what you just mentioned. With the slow rollout of vaccines and life returning to some new semblance of normalcy, still seems to be quite a bit of distance between us now and where that may be. Folks continue to purchase online, as you rightly said. And in fact, online sales of the U.S. retailers has jumped from 10% to 20% now during the pandemic. So what took 10 years to build up basically took 10 months to double. We'll continue to see that happening as well. And those retailers that have remained open during the pandemic, think about your big box, home improvement, wholesale and warehouse stores, as well as your local hardware store, continue to see that uptick in sales, and the orders are underpinning all of that. What we see coming down line overall will be continued strength in this market, but as I mentioned, we have to have a national policy around how we're going to stimulate exports. That's going to be really important to put people back into jobs. It's going to help balance traffic a lot better than it is right now, again, to try to force out some of those round trip and triangulated economics and bolster the abilities of our American manufacturing community and agricultural segments to really get reacquainted with their customers overseas. So there's a lot of work to do, even with this strong import flow happening now. Thanks, Jeff.
From Lisa Bartline and Reuters. Gene, can you explain what you mean by metering cargo? Are ships being diverted to other West Coast ports?
Yes, and it's not a popular decision. It's a very difficult one. I am not an individual who wants to turn a pound of freight away from our port, but we have to be realist. With 62 ships at anchor, we've got to do something different. And all parts of the supply chain have a role to play in this. No one's pointing any fingers, but if we can have some vessels try to get back on schedule, as has been outlined by Hapag-Lloyd of Hamburg, some other companies will be doing similar maneuvers so they can get these ships back on a fixed weekly schedule like they have been accustomed to for so many decades. That's going to be important for the company. It'll allow us a little bit of time to dig out, and we've been working very closely with the retailers nationally and here in California to try to do their level best to empty these containers, pick them up quicker than we're witnessing right now. And again, getting workers on the job is really key to all of this happening. In the intermediate term, we continue to look at gate activities and programs like the dual transaction and turn time activities we're promoting. Also, the chassis model to make sure that we have the chassis in the right place at the proper time, and expanding our digital information system, as you've seen now with 3 new modules that have been directed to the shipping public over the last 5 months. So there's a lot to do, but in the short term, temporarily having some cargo move through other ports so we can keep the American importers' supply chain flowing, I think is the right decision today.
There were two follow-up questions on these diversion of ships. One from Eric Watkins on whether we're concerned that this would be a permanent, any kind of a permanent loss in cargo, and from Niraj asking if we're working directly with other West Coast ports to redirect these sailings.
Eric, we'll do everything we can to make sure that this is temporary, but the American economy has to keep moving. And by stalling the progress of freight flow, it doesn't do anybody good. So we will do our very best to make sure that these are only temporary moves, and we'll welcome these companies back to Los Angeles as soon as we all see fit from a logistics arena. And looking at the other ports, yeah, there's been discussions. We just had a discussion online today with the Port of Oakland because they are impacted by our congestion down here. Many of our services call Los Angeles and then go north to Oakland, so they're arriving in Northern California later than normal as well. So working with Danny Wan and Brian Brandes and others to try to see what is best and how we could do things that will be less negatively impactful for the Port of Oakland is high on our list as well as other ports along the West Coast. There's also been an expedited service of CMA that is now making its first call in Oakland to avoid this congestion period here. So there's a lot of conversation happening in the industry, and everybody with the same goal of trying to chip away at this backlog and bring a level of certainty back to the port conveyance process. But good questions. Thank you, gentlemen.
From Tiffany Montgomery, who a website called Shop, Eat, and Surf, focused on the business side. When do we think the congestion will ease?
Well, Tiffany, that's probably the most important question in our industry, and I've stated publicly that if we do nothing, we will still have vessels at anchor come midsummer. So we have to take some of these steps and start moving, and we got to play catch up here with a lot of the activity that we're seeing right now on the sheer surge in the imports. So our goal is to keep chipping away at this and try to work down the numbers in concert with the liner companies, the marine terminal operators, and trying to put the best programs together, like segmenting cargo that moves out to the Inland Empire. That's about 1/3 of all the import traffic that we see here at the Port of Los Angeles, and if we can peel that off, move it out over nighttime when the roads and freeways are less congested, taking advantage of land that some private sector companies have come to us offering, I think we can help right there by taking a large swath out of the congestion on our marine terminals right away. The difficulty is many of those terminals and ships look like a jelly bean jar. We have to start segmenting this in a greater way, and some companies are leading the charge in this already, but we need more effort in this area. Thank you, Tiffany.
We have one final question open right now. That's from Kim Link Wills of FreightWaves. If anyone else has any questions, please type them in now. Otherwise, this will be the last question. Kim, we actually answered a couple of her questions in the last few minutes, but she does ask, has there ever been a Lunar New Year like this one?
Not that I can recall, and from most of our contacts on the ground, a lot of factories stayed open during the holiday. Some have called workers back from an abridged holiday setting, and they're playing catch up with orders too. So that's why when we talk about this, Kim, it truly is a supply chain phenomenon. The manufacturers are behind on orders. We can't fill the shelves fast enough at our retail level, and by bringing all this cargo in during a pandemic, we've got to make sure that we have healthy and safe workplaces for our skilled labor to join us every day in this effort. So it's very different from times. Even when I lived in Asia, I recall this being a very sacred and traditional holiday where many folks went back to their hometowns to celebrate with family and friends, and it just looks a lot different this year. But thanks for joining again today, Kim.
Very good, Gene. I don't see any further questions. So at this point, Gene, do you have any concluding remarks?
Sure. Thanks, Philip. I just want to take a moment to recognize that today, February 17th, is California Ports Day, an annual event organized by the California Association of Port Authorities, or CAPA. It's a day that CAPA sets aside every year so that representatives from its 11 member ports, from Humboldt to San Diego, can meet with state legislators and other stakeholders in Sacramento to update them about the critical role that our ports play in our state and national economies. Of course, we're doing that this year virtually, and I spent much of the morning on the phone with folks like our esteemed Lieutenant Governor Elena Kounalakis, the head of Cal EPA, Jared Blumenfeld, and so many others, including Assembly Member Patrick O'Donnell from right here in the port area. We want all of these folks and many more to know that CAPA's 11-member ports are responsible for handling 40% of all containerized imports and 30% of our nation's exports. We serve as the backbone of commerce for California, keeping goods flowing through the global supply chain and creating good, high-quality jobs. In fact, more than 1 million jobs in the state and 3 million nationally are linked to trade through CAPA member ports. Our ports are also recognized around the globe for their environmental leadership and sustainable operations. Our investments in new and promising technologies over the years have created some of the world's most environmentally friendly and innovative port facilities right here in California. I'm honored this year to serve the second year in my term as CAPA's president, and I'm very proud to have helped lead this organization during the year through some of the most challenging times of our industry. As we emerge from this pandemic, I look forward to doing whatever I can to keep all of California ports resilient and moving forward. I encourage you also to visit CAPA's new website, californiaports.org, for some great facts and updates about the impacts our ports are making right here in our own towns. Thank you very much for joining us today, and please stay safe, everyone.